Welcome back to Just Jake podcast. I'm Jake Guti, and I'm here with a very good friend of mine, a very special soul that I've connected with over the years. Her name is Jenny Lang, and she is a health and wellness emotional intelligence coach. She's board certified health and wellness coach, Worksite wellness specialist, CIJ Clarity Catalyst instructor, and just an awesome human being. So Jenny, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
Well, we've known each other now for going on since October of 21, and we met here in Kansas City at a symposium, a Health Freedom for Humanity symposium. And it, in my life today, there's no such thing as coincidences. They don't exist. Everything that happens to me has a reason or purpose behind it. And me running into you or you running into me at that symposium when I was just trying to mind my own business, and someone asked to come and sit down, and you happened to sit down next to me, and it started a great friendship, and I'm very thankful for that. So we've talked about this for a while now, and now we are manifesting a conversation on my podcast about health and wellness with you, the health coach. So why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and kind of give your background and where you're from, because obviously this is done virtually. You're not sitting in the room with me. And so kind of just tell the Just Jake audience about yourself and what's going on.
Well, and first off, I want to tell you that was the first major by myself trip, was to drive from Minnesota down to Kansas City for that symposium. And I was by myself. So I did that trip all alone, which was a big deal. I just knew I had to go. So that was, for me to make an instant friend. And it was, I can still remember, Jake, when I walked into that room where you were sitting, and I was like, I don't know what drew me to you, but I'm like, can I sit by you? I'm by myself. You look like you're by yourself.
I sat on the aisle, it's like, that means fewer people will talk to me and bother me. I'll just sit here by myself, and I just kind of really want to dial into these speakers and hear this lady with the Minnesota accent, and I'll be honest, I went to college with some people from Minnesota and Wisconsin, and just very friendly, outgoing people. I've never, I'm sure they exist, but I haven't had a bad experience with a Minnesotan yet. So with that accent and the smile, I was absolutely, and that kicked off a great weekend and a great friendship, which we cultivate today and still keep in touch on a regular basis with a group of people now that we've kind of expanded into, so what a fun weekend that was. I mean, that was an really was a life-changing weekend. That symposium really challenged a lot of things in how I live my life today, and just with coming out of COVID and how the world was, nuts, and it's really I've kind of taken that experience and expanded on a lot of things that were discussed over that weekend. So what a gift that was, and I cultivated this friendship out of that weekend. So why don't you introduce yourself and just kind of and give your background, and we'll kind of get into how you got to where you are now today, helping others with their health and wellness.
Sure. So yeah, like I mentioned, I'm from Minnesota. That's where you're seeing me from. I'm born and raised in Minnesota. I'm a middle-aged hockey mom, two boys, two teenagers, which is interesting for anybody that hears that and understands that. So I actually would never have imagined me even being on this screen, to be honest. If you would have asked me 13 years ago or told me 13 years ago, you're going to be a health coach and you're going to have your own practice, I would have thought you were crazy. So I actually was anticipating and planning on being the corporate lifer, just going into corporate America and being there and being happy and retire there. Well, the universe had different plans, that's for sure. So yeah, I know we'll get into that with the transition between corporate and how this all happened. But, You said my title perfectly. National Board Certified Health and Wellness Coach, which is a super long title. It basically means I'm at the highest level of health coaching possible. So I took the board test in 2020. When I met, so I was still working at, so I worked at Best Buy as 17 of almost 18 of the 20-year career history that I have was at Best Buy. So, and I did things there too from an employee wellness standpoint that were not part of my day job. So when I met Jake in October of 21, I literally was only out of my old life, my old career for about 8 weeks. I was brand new to the whole solopreneur lifestyle. So it was very new to me. And so that symposium was very much needed. And the way I got here was pretty unique. I don't know if you want me to go into that now, but
Yeah.
that's okay.
Dive on
So,
into it.
it's kind of a crazy story. I didn't see it coming, but so you kind of have to go back a little bit. So I grew up the youngest of 7. I have 5 older brothers. My sister is now passed. She passed when I was really young. But my family didn't have much money. So we didn't grow up with much money. So when I went to college and I was bucking the system because I was the only one that actually went to a 4-year college, but I was so determined to basically prove my worthiness really, because they were like, you're not gonna, I was told at a young age I wasn't gonna be smart. Can you believe it? Like when you're in like kindergarten, like, I don't know if she's gonna go anywhere and you're gonna be on special classes, which I was for a while. So yeah, so being told that I wasn't going to be smart, or that's what they told me, and going into those special classes and growing up into my elementary years and into high school, I held on to that thought, right? That's what it's going to be. So, but I wanted to prove, I'm always been the one, I want to prove people wrong. I don't know. I've always had that internal fire. So when I wanted to go to college, even though people said I wasn't going to go to college, even after I graduated high school, I did. And I put myself through that. But what I didn't really realize, that was the starting point of my health journey. Now that I look back, it's that hindsight is 2020 kind of thing. So it was so intensely stressful, putting yourself through college and working nearly full time, having I didn't have a good car. It was just like, you're constantly just trying to make things work. And it eventually did. And I went through that. I went and worked in some other companies, big real estate company, mortgage company. But then I moved into Best Buy soon after I graduated college. And if anyone understands the corporate life, it can be extremely stressful. A lot of pressure on you, a lot of high expectations, push you to keep going up the ladder, right? And you work crazy hours. And as that continued and I started to move in my personal life, I was getting married, I started having children. Then because I'm the youngest of 7, my parents were aging. So then I was at that, what they call it, like a sandwich generation. You're trying to take care of your little kids, and then you're trying to take care of your elderly parents. And my dad's health, and this is where you and I connected. My dad's health was the first one to start going, and they were divorced. So my parents were divorced when I was a year old. So I didn't really grow up with my father. He too was an alcoholic, and he chose alcohol over his family. So, and I don't have any remorse or anger towards him at all. But I didn't really grow up with him. So I was in my 20s, heading into my 30s, as his health started getting worse and worse and worse. And keep in mind, he was 48 when I was born. So you do the math, he's getting up there. So, and then all those years of the alcohol just took a toll. He had congestive heart failure and all these things. So I was juggling at one point in my early 30s between raising the children and taking care of my parents. And it was double everything for my parents since they were divorced. So the one kicker, though, was when I had my second son. And this is where my health and his health collided, and really just kind of like the atomic bomb of reaction. My youngest son was born with an unknown birth defect. So the first 2 years of his life was absolutely chaotic. He was in every ER, urgent care, hospital you can even think of here in the Twin Cities. Misdiagnosed with acid reflux and all these. So you're thinking of this little peanut who's like 7-8 pounds, all the way till when he's 2 years old, and he's constantly sick, antibiotics and tests and all these. And I'm like, we knew something was wrong and wasn't right. But finally, just before his second birthday, a doctor figured out what was wrong with him, and it was a laryngeal tracheal cleft. So think of the wall that separates your lungs from your esophagus, and there's a little divot in it, like I think of a cleft chin. Well, there's 1 to 10 stage, and he was stage 1. So thank goodness he was. So it was minor, but yet he was so tiny. But what was happening is when he was drinking, he was basically aspirating or drowning himself. It was going down to his lungs instead of his stomach. And so he was constantly getting these upper respiratory infections. And finally being able to uncover what that was, because it was incredibly stressful for my husband and I. And but at that time, my health just kept getting worse and worse because of the stress of it all,
Yeah,
and the
for
pressure
sure.
I had put on myself for all those years. I mean, I jokingly say it, but I was a hot mess. I was a crazy hot mess. I mean,
Well,
I had all the
how could you be
scans.
anything how could you be anything other than that?
I know,
You
right?
know?
I know.
But look, it all happened for you to get here, right?
Right. Yeah, I look back and I'm like, thank goodness I went through. It's like when you and I have talked about that. You go in your darkest days are such a blessing when you look back, because it got you to where you are now. So that's why this whole journey, this is where it led me. But when I was taking him for his second opinion, because the surgery to fix this, especially on an almost 2-year-old, was really risky, even though it was only stage 1. Um, we took him down to the Mayo Clinic, which is in Rochester, Minnesota, for a second opinion. And I'm very grateful I did that. But during that time, I can still remember to this day, I'm sitting in the car on our way to the Mayo Clinic, and I had been having, I had things like migraine headaches and acid reflux, digestive issues, weight issues. I mean, the list just went on and on and on. And anxiety was the number one. It was
Mm.
so high on the list. And I was having panic attacks at work. I mean, it was terrible, not sleeping. So I got the call as we were going down to the Mayo Clinic from my chiropractor, who at that point had been working with me. And he was more than a chiropractor. He did soft tissue work and things like that. But he couldn't figure out why I wasn't getting better, because my lower back was just so painful. And I was having trouble picking up my kids, the toddler, and having to get down on my knees and hold myself up to carry him. And so it was really bad. But he called me, and just after I'd had a scan done, and he goes, well, couple things. The first thing is you have a few discs in your lower lumbar spine that they're so deteriorated. You look like a 70-year-old on this scan. And I'm like, awesome. I'm in my mid 30s, early 30s. And I'm like, okay, what's the other thing? He goes, well, we also found a mass in your back,
Mm.
and we don't know what it is. You're going to have to go back and get a stronger, MRI scan of this to find out what it is. And it was like, the wall, just everything kind of crushed on me. And I'm like, okay, I'm supposed to go take care of my kid, and I have this back thing going. It was so eye-opening. That was and just to fast forward, I did have the scan. It's benign. It's just hanging out there. Don't know what it is, but that was the closest to the C word I will ever want to get. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? That's just like, no. And I now jokingly call it my go button, because that little thing that's in there is just push it, and it's like, no, you have to recreate your life. You have to take a different path. And that's really what ended up happening. I was like, if I don't take care of myself at this point, I'm literally not going to be around for these children. I have to do something different and take truly care for myself. So I worked on 2 different aspects of my health at that point. One, to get my physical being back in order, and then the mental being back in order. I had to overcome the anxiety, which, by the way, runs in my family. My mother's had depression nearly her whole life. She's been on antidepressants since I was born, back when Prozac came out. And so that runs in the family, and I can see anxiety traits even with other members of the family and so on. But I was like, I'm not going to live that life. I'm not doing
Mm.
it. So I found teachers, which you and I have talked about, like fellow teachers, Wayne Dyer and things like that, that helped me dig myself out of that dark hole I had gotten myself into while I was working on the physical side of me. So what ended up happening is I started doing hot yoga, I started changing what I was eating, and I was just doing it by myself. I'm like, I have to do this. You just have to find the willpower to keep doing it, right? No matter all those other things that are going on. So what was really strange, and you just said it early on, you don't, coincidences, like that happens. Like there's a reason it happens. Well, I'm at this hot yoga studio and I can still remember this too. Walking towards the door as I'm about to leave to put my shoes on, and there's this, stack of flyers. And I'm like, oh, what's this? Health coaching. That's cool. This woman does health coaching. I'm like, I could probably use her. She could probably steer me in the right direction of how to do this, because I'm just kind of flying by the seat of my pants. Well, I call her up and I hired her for 3 months, and she loved me because I was motivated. I was like, yeah, let's do this. Like, just give me all you got. And back then, we're talking 2013, and like the winter, spring of 2013. I hired her. I was talking to her, and she was a lawyer, a practicing lawyer who left law because of her own father's health issues. She's like, I want to do what I want to do. Like, this isn't the right path for me. She went from law to health coaching. And back then it was even more ambiguous than it is now. That's a huge career thing. So that kind of always stuck with me in the back of my head. I think it, like, knowing that someone had made that big of a career change, I was like, okay, that's cool, But then I started saying, okay, where did you go to school? And she's telling me, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. I literally ended with her, I think in May, early May. And I enrolled into the same school, what's the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And I enrolled and started in July. So talk about overachiever, like I've always been. And I went back to school during all this stuff, but I went into it actually just thinking, okay, a one-stop shop just to learn as much as I can. And so I was doing it more for myself than thinking I was going to actually have a practice, but the universe had other plans. So when I graduated after a full year of that program in 2014, so July of 2014, I also had other plans. So at Best Buy, I was a manager at the time, so I had employees. And one of my employees, if anyone's familiar with the corporate world, they have the diversity and inclusion team, and they oversee a network of employee groups. And the ones that they may have changed the titles of all of this now since I've been gone, but they had a set of groups that were sponsored by the company. So and they're called employee resource groups. So think of the military ERG, women's ERG, Asian ERG, like all of these bigger groups that are sponsored by the company. But underneath there, if you think of like in college, they had group like clubs, you kind of think of it that way. They had, a group for parents, or parents of multiples was even a spinoff of that one, parents of pets, but then they had a music one. I mean, all these super cool like clubs. Well, my employee was actually part of an ERG for the military. So he was doing a big presentation. He was sitting with me at my desk because he's like, help me get through these slides. I got to present in front of the executives. And this one conversation completely changed it again. So I'm sitting there and I'm like going through the slides and helping him with his presentation. And I'm like, this is so cool. Like, this is so cool that there's people that can get together in this company with the same mission or interest or whatever, right? Or background. And I said, God, I wish there was one for wellness. and I said, wouldn't it would be so cool, instead of me being the weird oddball drinking the green drink or juice or smoothie or whatever in a meeting, and someone's like, what the heck are you drinking? I was like, if I could find my people, that would be super awesome. And so he goes, you should start one. Once again, overachiever. Sure, I'll do that. So that's like, I'm not kidding. I think it was like August, maybe July, August, right after I graduated. And by October, after going all through the approval and coming up with a logo and mission statement, all that, I started the employee wellness group that's there. And that's a non-paid position. So I created the club for employee wellness. It was awesome. It was hard at first. It was like creating a business within a business is what it felt like. So I had this job as a manager, senior manager, when I left, running a full-on business within the company. And then I was helping to drive this. And I partnered with legal and HR and diversity inclusion and all these executives and things as it went on. So it started with 2 employees, me and one other woman. And by the time I left in 2021, it was at 1,000 members.
Wow.
And it was a blast. It was such a blast. And I took employee wellness, as I was learning it and listening to the employees, I took the approach very differently than more standard employee wellness programs. It came across more like employee to employee instead of hierarchy down to employee. And so we had these great connections that were made. And it was so cool. If you're in the corporate environment, it's usually you leave your personal life at the door. It was kind of a common thing that we were taught and told. And I broke that. I said, no, bring your whole self to work. Like, let's see the humans behind the employees, right? So that I tried to create that culture, and it was amazing. So I did at that same time, for some reason, my intuition or God speak or whatever you want to say told me, just for fun, let's see what this coaching thing is about. And once again, overachiever, I went on, I can still remember going online. I'm like, so I'm a Libra, October 19th. And so I was like, oh, Libra, the scales, oh, balance, life balance. That's cool. That'd be a cool, like cool logo and a cool name. So I went in there, looked up the URL. I'm like, oh, it exists. I'm like, I'll just buy this. I'll just see where this goes, just kind of like playing around with it. Well, I ended up having my day job, running the employee wellness group, and on the side hustle doing private coaching during this time. I ended up doing it, and I really loved it, to the point that as the years went on with Best Buy and that group got crazy busy, it was a ton of work, that Libra was kind of sitting out there. Like, I would have 1 or 2 clients at a time, but it kind of hung out there. And as more as I always call it like growing up out of my day job. I kind of grew up out of it. Like, you grow out of clothes, right? I just felt like there was more to my calling than that. And so, but honestly, the hardest part was knowing if I walked away from the day job, I walked away from both that and the employee wellness group. And that was hard. That was a hard pill to swallow. So it took me years, and my husband made a career change at one point, so I had to hold off for a while. But then I just got to the point where my internal being was just crazy. Like, I would have nights where I'm working till 11, 12 at midnight, working these, and I'm crying. And my husband's like, are you okay? And I'm like, I have to get out of this. Like, it's like my soul is going, get out, go, you're to do other things. Right. But I still had that tug of war. Like, I don't want to let it go. And I really love Best Buy, and I love my employees, and I love being there. And so, but I eventually just said, okay, I got to make this decision. So I put my notice in 2021 in May, Memorial Day weekend, just before that. And I gave them all of that summer, because I was running a $1.5 billion business within the company. It wasn't something to sneeze at. It was pretty busy, and I wanted to give them a long runway. So I went the whole summer transitioning everything. And then I officially left right before Labor Day. And wow, that was a crazy experience to make that big of a jump. I still look back and like, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I did that. And I'm still doing it. So that's kind of how the whole journey ended. And like I said, if you ask the Jenny from 2012, they told her, like, this is what your life's going to look like, I would have laughed you out of, I would have been like, you're crazy. You're absolutely crazy. No way. So yeah, this is how it all started. It's all those crazy little synchronicities along the way that kept pushing me in this direction.
Yeah. What a great story. It's librahealthcoach.com is your website.
Okay. Yep.
And I guess let's get into that a little bit. What do you do for people? What's your, like, what are some of the services that you provide? And I mean, I don't want to gloss over your story, because what an amazing journey that has been. I guess along that way, how did setting up that stuff for Best Buy and that wellness group that you set up, how did that help you launch into what you're doing today? Like, what can you take? Like, did you design what you're doing today? Did that help you build? Was that a vital piece of what you're doing now? Like, was that, and let me get this straight. So you started doing that in 2014. So you ran that for 6-7 years.
7 years when I left.
7
Yep.
years. Yeah. So how's that contribute? Like, obviously there's, a relationship between those two. And
Yep.
you said you had it going on the side. Like, what are some of the things that you came across that have benefited you in terms of your coaching? Did it help you design what you're doing today? Did it, in that realm, like, kind of discuss what's it look like for Jenny Lang today in what you're doing?
So yes, there was that was kind of the blessing and the curse. I wasn't getting paid to do that work. It was all volunteer. So, I always say it's unpaid position, because I kind of voluntold myself. Honestly, it wasn't volunteer, it was voluntold. I told myself I wanted to do it. So what ended up happening is some of the biggest things I learned were, one, I went from just private coaching to now having group coaching programs. I learned a lot from having a group like that and understanding the dynamic, but also my leadership style was different. I was very empathic, and I wanted to foster and grow employees. So that kind of mentality comes through in my coaching too. And I think it was just hardwired. I didn't know it to be a coach. So the first thing is I ended up building group coaching programs within Libra because of all the things I learned in that work. So a couple aspects that probably set me apart, which I still haven't found another group coaching program that's like it, and it's more work on me, but I think gives a better experience for the individuals that are in the groups, especially. So one thing that I learned when I was at Best Buy was to truly listen to what people need and what they want and what they desire from their health and well-being. So what I did is I brought that same because when you do that, you listen and you hear them and you ask for their input and their feedback, and you tweak it and actually create something for them. They're bought in. They're totally bought in. They're like, she listened to me. She brought what I asked for. This is what I need. It was awesome. You bring in that compliance or acceptance, engagement, huge. And so it wasn't that difficult to do either. For me, it wasn't, because I love talking to people and getting to know people. So I brought that same mentality into Libra. So I'll give you an example. So I've had group coaching programs for a while, for a couple years. And recently I actually opened a women's only group health coaching program. So it's 6 months, it's 12 sessions. You meet every other week. You recorded. We meet bi-weekly for an hour. But the thing that I do different is that the people in the group help me design what the content's going to look like. I'm not going to tell them what I think they need to know. They tell me what I need to share with them, if that makes sense. There's a portion of each session where it's, I wouldn't say it's educational. It's like, here's some information around this topic, what I know as going through all the schooling, but it's always the client that leads the way. Every single individual is different from another, and their lifestyle is different, what they need, their health is different. They are the driver always, but I'm the passenger with the map trying to guide them to the direction they want to go. And so the group coaching programs are designed by the people, not by the coach, but by all of the people in that group. So I always tell people, you could go through this women's group health coaching program, and when I open it up again, if it's successful, because it's the first one I've done, when I open it up again, that one's going to be different than the first one. There could be overlap of topics, because I have a strong hunch that a lot of the women are going to want to talk about hormone health and things like that, right? So there's going to be some overlap, but every single one's going to be unique. And I feel like it should be customized. It shouldn't be, I was taught at IIN, it's not a one size fits all. Like, Jake, what you need is not always the same as I need, and so on. So I try to have that same mentality of designing these programs and have to truly listen to my clients and what they need versus me telling them what to do. So that's really how I design these. The other aspect, another synchronicity, was because I'm board certified, I have to have continuing education credits. I have to have 36 hours every 3 years to keep my certification. So at the end, I got it in 2020. So at the end of 2023, around that time, it was like the summer of that time, I was like, oh my gosh, I have 16 credits I got to get. And at the time I had been asking the universe, because I kept having these clients that would come to me and they thought they wanted coaching, but when in reality they needed a therapist. And there is a very distinct difference between a therapist and a coach. I have therapists that I can refer to, which is good. But when I have somebody come to me, I want to make sure that they truly want to move forward. A therapist is like to work through the stuff of your past, right? Of the things that have been holding you up. Then you get down, if you think of it a timeline, there's a gray zone where you can have a therapist and a coach because you're on that spectrum of like, okay, I think I'm ready. I'm ready to start moving forward. I've done the work. And that's where the coach and the therapist can kind of live in your world at the same time. But the coach is always trying to move you forward. So that's just something I always try to explain that to people because they kind of sometimes get that mixed up. But what was happening is I was getting clients coming to me and I was still kind of considering myself a rookie, not catching some of this. And I would have clients coming to me and they had so much mental stuff going on, emotional stuff that they needed to work through before they could move forward. Because it was really hard for a coach when somebody says they want to go and they're not going. And I was like, I see the potential in you. I want you to keep going. But I'm like, okay, and I'm not going to take somebody's money to take their money. I'm just not wired that way. So I would cut out their program and say, here, I'm not going to do this with you because I want something better for you. And I want to refer you to therapy because I want you to take the money and put it in that so that we can get you to the point where you can come back to me and let's go. And they were always, were great about it. So I've had a couple clients like that, even just last year or 2 years ago now, that were in those situations. And I'm in my head, I kept going, okay, they're me, but from 13 years ago, they're the me from 2012. Where I was just struggling mentally and emotionally and I was stuck. I mean, I had to have literally God whack me on the back of the head with that, the tumor thing going on and for me to shake me out. But I was realizing I kept having it in my head. I'm like, I want a program for the mental and emotional intelligence type side, the mindfulness, the stuff I learned and you learned from Louise Hay and Wayne Dyer and all of those people, right? Those were they're still my teachers, even though they're not here anymore on the physical plane, they're still my teachers. And so I'm like, gosh, if I could create a cohesive program that was like that, almost like I tell people it's like step 0 of the health journey. If you can get your mindset and your mindset and your emotions and everything and learn really good tools that keep you on track, the rest of it's way easier. So I call it step 0 of health coaching. And I'm like, if I could do that, then people could have it. They'd feel like they could step into health coaching without actually even talking about movement and exercise or, what you're eating and all of that. Like we don't even get into that yet. So what was weird is going back to my certification credits I had to get. I found a program that gave me 19 CEUs for the National Board certification, and it was called Clarity Catalyst for Coaches. And I was like, well, that's cool. I'm like, it was designed. She spun it, and her name's Jennifer Grace. She worked with the doctor, which I'll talk about in a second, that created it. So Clarity Catalyst is now inside my practice after lots of training to do it and investment on my part. But when I first sat into that program as the student and the coach, I was literally fell in love immediately. I was like giddy. I can still remember how exuberant I felt. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I wanted. This is what I was looking for these clients. And so I went through the program, got my CEOs, and I said, Jennifer, I want to get into your program to teach me to teach this. I want this as part of my practice. So I did. And it is so good. So Clarity Catalyst is its external name, like public name is what I'll call it. But what it came from was in the late 1970s, Dr. Michael Ray started a master's level course at Stanford University called Creative Insight Journey. And so it was for his master's students. And the reason he did it was he was noticing that the students graduating with their bachelor's degree go on to these careers. Then they start families and they get into that work mode and that, you know what I mean? That hustle and bustle kind of. And he's like, there's more to life to that. And I want to teach them to enjoy life, to have some tools that keep them from not getting overstressed and anxiety and overwhelmed and all of that. So he created a program, which they used to jokingly call the woo-woo class. It was the weird class, but it ended up being one of the most popular ones at Stanford. But what ended up happening, and students loved it, and it was super popular, and then 9/11 happened. And the story I've been told is what he did is he offered it to 400 widows publicly, to 400 widows that were affected by 9/11. to help them through that major event for them. And it was so loved that he had the realization he needed to have it out of the school and into the public. And that's how Clarity Catalyst was created. So it went from a master's level course into a public program. And so there's other coaches out there. So Dr. Michael Ray is now retired. And Jennifer Grace was one of like his understudy. She's now the teacher of the teachers, or if you want to call it that, or the facilitators. So she teaches, and she does talk, she works with coaches quite a bit, because there's a training specific for coaches that helps make that program come to life. You know what I mean? Just from the extra training with motivational interviewing and things like that we go through. And so that's how I brought that program in. I'm telling you, another synchronicity just landed in my lap. And it was meant to be. And that's, so I brought
funny
that.
How that works.
Yeah.
So let's dig into the Clarity Catalyst a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, and from my understanding, it's kind of a great baseline to kind of have it as a standard before you go into your coaching. So what are some of the more valuable points, just to touch on, that you learned? Like, what was the most beneficial, like maybe a couple bullet points of what you took away, and if there were any aha moments in terms of these hours that you had to put into getting your certification to be an instructor for the Clarity Catalyst. What are some of the most beneficial things that you've been able to take away? Because this only been about a year now, right?
A year and a half or so. Yeah, officially. Some of and I'll even speak kind of to the things that the students that go through it really resonate. So there's a couple different components. It's really diving deep into your purpose and your why and your creativity, which a lot of us lose when we get into our corporate jobs or jobs in general or life in general. We kind of lose that side of us that finds enjoyment in life, right? We do touch on that. And then we also talk about the stress, the common stressors, time, money, relationships, and all that. But then the other components that are really stand out is, how do you handle life when it goes awry, or even in those simple moments where you're constantly stressed or anxiety? How do you pull yourself out of that easily? So there are practical tools taught in the course that you can use at any time, which has been super great. I even use some of them in the workshops that I offer for free. And then the last thing is just shift, and you will get this because you know what I mean. You shift your mindset. So there's things that we do, a lot of visualization meditations and ways to think and see life differently. And it's hard to explain until you're in it. But there's these, even like, there's a meditation, and they call it meditation, but they're always like visualizations. They're not like you're just sitting there in silence. And one of them is your future self. And it's one that, I'm not kidding, every single time I do this one, somebody's in tears, because they're talking to them, they're bringing them on this journey and putting them into their future self, and what would their future self want them to do. And it just allows them to dive deep so that they can move forward finally, and just get the whole point. Like, some people like Clarity Catalyst, that name's kind of weird. You're getting clarity so that you can move on. You can move forward with your life. So the name is very intentional, the way it's worded. So I hope that kind of gives you an idea of some of the things that we go through. It's very just, you have to remember, it's a master's level course. These sessions are 90 minutes and they're deep, and you're meeting with people and you're talking, some things you're going to resonate with some people and their stories, because some are willing to share. And there's homework in between sessions to help ground it in deeper. And honestly, and I learned this from Jennifer too, is a lot of people will take it more than once, because there's just so much content. If you go through, a divorce, and then years later you're becoming an empty nester, like, there's different phases of your life, and some people revisit it. Jennifer's had somebody go through it 5 times, because there's something else she didn't catch or saw, or it resonated more in that time. So it's one of those programs you can take over and over. And really, the one part, which even with my coaching, is I want people to take what they can and instill it in their life. Like, I want people to learn and and find their path on their own. I never want to be the forever coach. I want you to really learn and educate them. So, and I've gotten some amazing messages from students that have gone through that program, that they find their confidence, they find their passion again. They understand how to have better relationships. They have empathy for those that are hard to live with. You know what I mean? There's like this, it's a really deep course, and I think it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds awesome. And these are life, tools to help you, get through things that we're all going through. It's like, it, in this world that we live in, it's like there's nobody that, even no matter how good someone's life looks, it's like they're just better at hiding lack of a better word, their shit than other people, because we all have our shit.
Yep.
Um, and I kind of want to transition not to get too deep into what you see on an individual level, but what are some, especially after coming out of what we saw in 2020 and the obvious mental health crisis that this country is going through, this world's going through, but especially, here in America, it's at crazy levels, the suicide rates and people dealing with anxiety and depression, and it's at an all-time high. What are some of the things that people are coming to you, that you're seeing very common? Like, I don't know if there's a thread or, like you said, everybody who comes to you has their own issues, and we all have our own individual fingerprint, but are there some themes that you're seeing lately, or, you've been in this for a few years now. What are is there something that you see on a regular basis that is kind of a common thread that people, first off, if someone's coming to you, there's a willingness, and they're identifying that, hey, I need to do something.
Yeah.
And it's like that's a big step in itself. People just, because I've learned in my life, it's like until I was ready to get help, like nobody could help me. And so that willingness is a vital piece of making that, I guess, that spark or the catalyst to create the change, right? Because that's what has to happen, right? Because I can't continue to do what I'm doing and expect things to change if I'm not making some audibles, some differences, some idea changes, some whether it be in the health and the nutrition, all of that sphere. But what are some of the things that you see on a regular basis that that people, probably, maybe they say, I know I did. So I'm just going to speak of my experience is like, I'll deal with that later. Or, I know this is an issue, but I'll address that later. But what are some of the things that you see common with people who seek your help in whatever aspect that be, whether dealing with anxiety, nutrition, fitness? Because I do want to get into, what you've been able to do is amazing, in terms of helping people with type 2 diabetes and my experience with that. But just kind of, just, I guess, to have some identification for the audience, like, oh, well, you know, I'm dealing with that too. And maybe that, if it just helps one person say, oh, I can start. And where do I start?
Yeah. As far as your question goes, there is an interest, at least, right? When people come to me, they're like, they know, even if it's at a small scale, they know they need to do something, right? They're at that point, like, I got to do something. But yet there's some that are super hesitant, like they're scared. And in my world, when you come into my world, I want to break down that fear. Like, I want that to go away, for one, because I want people to realize it doesn't need to be complicated. I'm not going to force you to do something. I want to be that co-pilot with you to create a new life for yourself. And you can go as fast or as slow as you want, right? Whatever makes you comfortable. But the common things that I get with people that come to me now, it's interesting with Clarity Catalyst. It's still there, but even more prominent. So I'll have those that come, they're like, I'm really overwhelmed. I'm at this turning point in my life, where I don't love what I do. I'm having, like, relationships aren't really good. there's this inner calling to do something different, but I'm scared and I don't know what that is either. Like some people are just like just starting out. There's just something more to life. And so back to your other statement about COVID and all of that went on, the one thing I have noticed in a shift in people that I know it's going to sound weird. That was a blessing for all of us. I know it's going to sound crazy to some people. It was horrific and terrible. But at the same time, like I said, you have to go through your darkness to see the light. We went through our darkness and it woke so many people up to the fact that life is precious. Life, you need to not get stuck. Don't allow yourself to get stuck in it. You get to create it, and your life is just, it's short. It goes by so fast. Like I even think, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'll be 48 soon. That's crazy how fast it goes. And so the time is precious. So that was it's an eye opener for people. I've noticed them shifting, going, okay, that now that I realize how scary that was, that people are losing their lives over this, that means I should really pay attention to what I'm doing and do what I love and have the life that I deserve. So that was, with that though, there's people that come to me and they want that, or they know they want to make their body healthier, because going through that, the pandemic and people realizing, oh my gosh, I'm not healthy. I could get really sick if I keep going down this path. I need to change that. But then also the mental and emotional side and creating their new life. And when you talk about health and wellness, just to sidebar this, I'm not just when I coach, I'm not trained to just talk about what you put in your body for food and movement. And I don't even call it exercise. I say movement.
Sure.
Intentionally. Mm-hmm. But there's social support. It's your relationships, financial well-being. I mean, I go through it all. There's actually an evaluation I go through with every single client on this, to really just, because you're a whole person. It's not just those two components. So the COVID stuff, I think, as crazy as it may sound to some people, was a blessing in disguise. I think it really woke people up to realizing how precious their life is. So when they get down to this point where they're like, enough's enough, it may have actually kickstarted a lot of people to say, enough's enough. This is my life and it's precious and it could be gone like that I need to do something different. And they get the inner courage to do it finally, right? Instead of just being stuck in that mundane thing that they don't enjoy. So that's usually where I get a lot of people. And usually it's women, but I have coached men. And I actually, because I'm HIPAA compliant, I do have one client that I am allowed to talk about publicly. And I'll share his story because I know you've talked to him too. And, but, I want to make sure that people understand that coaching isn't like a one size fits all. And it's very bigger than just your like I said, your food and your movement. But the people that come to me are typically women, and they're going through that phase of 35 to 55 age, and usually working mothers, because they're juggling jobs and kids and all of that, and they lose themselves in the process. And moms, I think many of you know what I'm talking about. I did it too. You are putting so much of your energy and life into caring for others. And like me, some are caring for both the kids and the parents. And so they come to me going, okay, I need to really start taking care of myself. I'm going down the wrong path, or I'm overwhelmed and I just can't get out of it. Something needs to change. So I usually have those triggers are usually what comes to me. And what I end up doing is I have a discovery call with anyone that's interested. I sit free. I mean, I just talk to me, and just learning and understanding where they're coming from, I can help them evaluate. It's more like a strategy call. Like, where are you? Do you need a therapist and not use me, helping get them to the right person? Or should they start in Clarity Catalyst? Or should they go into group coaching because they enjoy having that support with multiple people? Or would private coaching be ideal? So like, I really sit down and get to know people right out of the gate to make sure that they understand where they're going. But it's been interesting to change my perspective about what we went through a few years ago, and then see the outcome of what came from it, and see it in a way that most people think I'm nuts, but I'm okay with that, because I just see it differently. I had to have my own darkness before COVID to shake me out of my life, right? I would have continued if it didn't. So that's why I always say my potential cancer diagnosis was my greatest blessing. So there's a lot of people that are doing amazing things because they were rocked, a few years ago. They're shifted to do something different, bigger, better, and helping others and so on from it.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because we are coming up, we're in the back half of 2024 and, you know, next spring will be 5 years, and look, my experience, and I don't even really like to mention it all that much, even talk about, COVID. It's just something that people talk about now, but it's like it, and I know we've discussed this, but it's like my life didn't change. And I look at, and that's why a lot of people, would come up to me and be like, "What are you doing? What'd you do? Why is it like you seem like the only person it's not affecting?" And it was because I had been through so much trauma and I was just prepared for this. And it's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I'm already living my life in a habitual way, in a healthy way. I'm already working on my mental health, my physical health, my spiritual health. I'm already working on that on a daily basis. This is what I do. These are just my habits now." And so when that all came up, I just kept doing what I was doing, and it's like the crazy thing is, in 2014, that's, when I got sober. And even before that, I had my health bottom when I weighed 374 pounds, in 2013. And it's like it took me actually having to see death in the mirror,
Yeah.
right? And that's kind of what COVID did to people. But for me, it's like you don't have to get to that point. Unfortunately, that's like, for me in my life experiences, death has been the biggest persuader to get me to make change. And that's kind of what I like to tell people. And my message to others is like, you don't have to get to that point to make a change. You can make a change without having to get to that extreme. Unfortunately, sometimes that's what it takes. Like for you, it's the same way. You had to have that cyst in the back, the tumor, and then you're like, this is mortality looking at, right face to face with it.
Yeah.
So it's like that was 5 years ago, and so I don't think it sounds crazy. I think it's, a shift in perspective, which is when we zoom out, that's what this takes. We have to change our perspective on how we wanna live our life, and I love what you said earlier, and it kinda reminds me of Mel Robbins kinda talks about it, is like, if if you wanna be someone different, you have to act like that person already. Right? So if I want to be this, I just have to start acting like this healthy person on a daily basis if I want to be this healthy person. And so, um, it's not crazy to say that about COVID, and it's like it all happens in its perfection, right? That,
Yeah.
like, for me, it's like that's what needed to happen. And people still talk about, well, for me, if I would have been where I was in 2014 when COVID happened, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't still be sitting here, right? If I hadn't made those changes already. But I also know that I wouldn't have been able to help people the way I helped them. And so it's like that's the perfection for me of being where I was when I needed to be there for 2020,
Right.
right? And so kind of let's dive into, you know, um, you know, you well know me, you know my story, and how in 2015 I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. I was and that's what the crazy thing is. And I'll just quickly tell my story, because I had a bottom in 2013. I ate a 75-ounce steak, uh, a 16-ounce twice baked potato, a dinner salad, 8 pickled beets, and a piece of Texas toast. All of that in under an hour. 2 days later, I step on a scale and I weighed 374 pounds. And I was 33 years old. I looked over in the mirror and I saw just no resemblance of all of the college Division I soccer goalkeeper, that the athlete that I grew up being. That that person did not exist in the mirror that I was looking at, and I was looking at myself in the mirror. I didn't like the person I saw, um, and I had a realization. It's like I'm not going to see 40. I'm not going to see 40. That thought dropped me to my knees, uh, in tears. And that's what it took for me to be like, I got to do something about it. Um, Fast forward, I lose like 100 pounds. My brother and I make a bet. Um, we have a contract, the betterment of brothers. And I lose 100 pounds in about a little over a year. And then, that would have put us at 2014. I'm still, you know, 270 pounds. I played soccer at 200 pounds, 205 pounds. So I'm still 70 pounds overweight. I go to the doctor. I'm about 90 to 100 days sober at this point in time. I'm really concerned. I had a liver diagnosis in the late, so it'd been 2008 or 9 that I had pre-cirrhosis and developing spots from my drinking. I'd quit drinking, but this was 5 years later. So I had a massive amount of fear about the damage I'd done to my body. Yet I was suggested in the program that I work, a 12-step program. Part of that was facing fears and stepping up to challenges. One of those was going to see a doctor and getting a physical. I go to the doctor, I get a physical. He walks in the room after doing blood work and says, "Jake, I got some bad news." I'm like, "Oh shit, my liver's done." And he was like, "Nope, you have type 2 diabetes." And I had a father who had type 2 diabetes, a grandmother who had type 2 diabetes, and I watched them shoot themselves up with insulin every day and take pills for a long period of time. And that I wanted nothing to do with that. I rationalized with the doctor, "Hey, I don't want to do that. I'll do anything but that." And he said, "Unfortunately, you have A1C at about 14.5. You're living at about 600 or 700 blood sugars daily, and your pancreas is dead." And so he said, "We need to basically put paddles to your pancreas." So, I've read in, medical journals about people putting themselves back into pre-diabetes and in some instances reversing it. I have a nutrition here. Why don't you meet with her? And so I was shooting myself up twice a day with insulin, and I was on 1,000 milligrams of metformin, and I go see this nutritionist. And look, losing 100 pounds, people are like, first thing they ask me is like, "What'd you do?" And the first thing I did in that whole process is like, I used to eat fast food almost daily, at least 5 times a week. I would just because of the convenience, the hours that I worked. It was just the easiest way. Honestly, I was addicted to it. I'd become addicted to the fast food, and just because it was easy, and it just I have an unhealthy relationship with food, and I would find comfort in it, and it just became, a routine. It just became part of my habits. And so I was first thing I did, if it had a drive-through window in it, I stopped eating there. And that was the very first thing. And that's what I tell people, what's the first thing you did? If it has a drive-through window, I stopped eating there. And so I was able to, just within stopping eating fast food and walking a couple times a week with my dogs, I was able to lose a lot of weight. But I was 175 pounds overweight. But just by doing those things, and changing my diet a little bit, not nearly to the extreme that it is today, but just by doing those things, I was able to lose some weight. And then I see this nutritionist, and that's when I kind of went to a whole nother level. That's when I found out about bone broth. That's when I found out about intermittent fasting. And because she'd see like, what do you have for breakfast? I'd be like, a glass of orange juice, some yogurt, Cliff Bar. And she's like, "No, that's all got to go." And I'm like, "That's healthy, right? That's healthy." And it's like, no, no, no. And that's why I started learning about nutrition, like real nutrition. Um, and fast forward, I got off of the insulin in about 10 months with intermittent fasting and, really cutting down processed food. I was taught, if it has more than 3 ingredients, you probably shouldn't be eating it. Stay away from the middle of the grocery stores. Those things that a lot of people hear. Um, like hearing those things and then actually doing them are two different things. Like how do you help people create habits to, and I really want to direct people to your website, librahealthcoach.com, because you have a wonderful amount of resources in terms of recipes for whole healthy food. And so I'll finish my story quickly is that it took me 10 months to get off the insulin. It took me another 16 months to get off all of my medications. Today, I live completely medication free. I don't take anything from I don't even have diabetes. It's completely reversed. I have an A1C of 5. Um, and the doctor walked in, he read me my charts and he was in tears because what he told me is like, hey, man, I tell you the exact same thing I tell everybody is because everybody's reaction when they get a diagnosis of that kind of, you know, I don't want it's not it's definitely something that people think you have to live the rest of your life on this medicine. And this is just chronic. You're gonna have to live with this chronic illness. And there's systems set up that way that people want you to think that you're going to live with this medicine for the rest of your life. And so my doctor told me, he's like, hey, I didn't know if I actually believed that. Like, I just told you what I read and I tell everybody that and nobody does anything about it. And he said, now I can look my patients in the eye and I can tell them, hey, I had somebody reverse their diabetes. This is what they did. And if you are serious about not taking medication, then go see my nutritionist. They can help you. And when I tell people that I reverse diabetes, most people are like, what? You can do that? It's like, yep, yep. And so, why don't you share kind of like when you deal with people who, come to you and like you said, everybody comes to you at a different place, but there's an amazing story that you have with one of your I don't- clients, I guess is what they're called.
Yeah.
One of your clients that came to you who was a type 2 diabetic, and how'd you help them kind of kick their diabetes?
And first of all, I want to tell you, your nutritionist is awesome. I might have to get her name. She sounds amazing. And I want to preface with something because there's still this misnomer of what health coaching is. And I'm going to give you 2 analogies of what it is. And this ends up clicking with people. I am not a dietitian, first of all. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. I always make sure people understand that that is not me. But as a holistic, if you had all of them as a team, you would skyrocket. You mean talk about an army of support, right? And I always tell people, get your army of support. So have a doctor, have a functional medicine doctor, get a whomever, right? So I always want to caveat with that, but I want to give 2 analogies of health coaching that I have used and it seems to resonate. The first one is everyone's done this. They've gone into the doctor. The doctor says, this is what's wrong. High cholesterol, high blood pressure, you need to lose some weight, right? Those are some of the common ones. And they get that sheet, that piece of paper that says, this is what you need to do. And it doesn't really tell you what to do or how to do it. It just tells you what's wrong, right? Some doctors, I had a really good doctor, always like, here, do these things, olive oil and Mediterranean diet, things like that. It was awesome. But you have that sheet of paper and you walk out and you're kind of like, deer caught in headlights. You're like, what do I do? How do I do this? So imagine if someone like me was sitting in the waiting room waiting for you to come out of that appointment, takes a piece of paper and says, all right, I put my arm around your shoulder and say, okay, let's do this together. Let's do this. And I'm with you along the way of creating and figuring out what works for you. So that's an analogy that works with people when they think of health coaching. Another one is this. Imagine my client and myself are sitting in a car. The client is in the driver's seat. They know where they want to go. There's a destination, right? They want to go from here to there, whatever their goal is. I'm sitting in the passenger seat with the map in my hand, and I'm a little old school. I'm not doing GPS here. I'm talking a physical map. I'm a Gen Xer. So an actual paper map, right? And I can see 30 different ways to get there. Now, you as the client tell me how fast, how slow, what works, what doesn't work in your life. So I'm navigating based on all of those parameters to just keep you moving forward, holding you accountable, keeping you focused, taking the guesswork out of it, the overwhelm out of it, right? And being with you on the journey. That is the ultimate way it should be. And so that's how I see coaching. And it may not be the same with every coach, but that's how I see it. And so I'm not telling you what to do. I'm helping you navigate through it. And so, so that's two things I want to talk about. So with regards, so I am HIPAA compliant, but I have gotten free right to talk about one client. And so his name is Tim, and I'll only give his first name. And he came to me, and Jake, he came to me after I had met you, which was really interesting because you two, what I do when you come into my world, I truly care. I think that's probably my soul was pushing me out of that corporate world because I cared so much. I was actually almost, I don't want to say talked down to about it because I truly cared. I give a ton of time to my employees and everything, right? I saw the human behind the employee and so on. But that same mentality comes through my coaching because when someone comes into my world, I give it my all. I truly care. And so with Tim, he came into my world and I can still remember, gosh, you always have those visuals in your head, right? I'm driving and I get this call and he goes, "Hey, Jen," he goes, "I got your name. I think you are in this health or life coaching thing. And I literally just left the doctor's office and I'm in trouble. The doctor said my liver is really screwed up. And if I don't do something, I'm not living for another 5 years." And I was like, okay. He's like, "Are you into this, like something with health and wellness?" People don't get a health coaching totally. He's the coolest man on the planet. I swear, I just love him. So I'm like, yep. And I said, "I think I could help. So let's talk about this." So he gave me some of the story in the car. I'm driving. He's, in the car with his wife. And he's freaked out because he got to that same point. You did. I did. And you never want somebody to go that far, right? And so here's the crazy story. I think that was just before his 60th birthday or around that 60th birthday mark. And he was like, wow, what am I doing? So he was diabetic and had been for a long time, type 2 diabetes. I believe high cholesterol, and don't quote me on this, all of this, because it's been a while, but he had high blood pressure. I do know that. He used to drink and no longer. He got out of that because he had rough younger years. And so there was a lot of damage to the body that he had to deal with. But the diabetes and the liver, the impact on the liver at that point was scary for him because he had grandchildren now, and he wanted to be with them. And he was overweight too. So I think he was pushing, I think it was just over 300. And so what ended up happening is he did hire me. And he's just like, it's so funny that I use that first analogy about being at the doctor's office. He literally said that. He goes, "I have the sheet right here. I don't know what to do. How do I do this? How do I start? I'm clueless, And the interesting part about him is two things. One, he lives out in the countryside of Minnesota, so farmland country. So the access to healthy foods and so on is a little different out there, right? You can go to the farmers or farmers markets if they have them, but you have to drive a ways and so on, right? I think the closest thing he has is like a super Walmart or something like that, right? So that was interesting, but we navigated through it just fine, which he was always surprised by. And the other thing is he's a long haul truck driver. So think about the ultimate desk job. You can't even stand when you're driving, and so he's driving these super long distances in a 18-wheeler, and he's like, the only chance I have to do anything is when I stop to pee and fill up my truck. And I was like, well, this is going to be interesting. We're going to have to get really creative with this, Tim. So he's like, I need to be able, what do I make to bring with me? What can I do when I'm stopping? Because I have to be on time. If anyone knows truck driving, you need to be on time, right? You got to stay on schedule. And it's his own business. So he's like make sure his customers are happy, right? It's his own truck and everything. So I worked through it with him. And some things came to surprise him, actually. The one thing that he started noticing was, well, actually a couple things. One, when he started, I always tell this to my clients, I want you to erase the programming or the thoughts that you hear in social media about just like full on keto diet, full on whatever, Mediterranean, there's all these diets, right? Just erase that. Just erase it. Like, I don't want you to even think about boxing yourself into one diet. I want you to create your diet, the one that works for you, the one that makes your body feel the best. And so I've always taught that with my clients. I'm like, there are people always like, what's your diet? And I'm like, the Jenny Lang diet. What
And
makes
it's
me feel
amazing
good?
the
Yeah.
space right now in social media because you have the vegans yelling at the carnivores and look, I've gone both ways. I went, almost 3 years without eating anything except for fish. I'm back eating beef and chicken. I don't eat pork. But the reality is those people feel better when they change their diet, whether it be they go straight carnivore or whether they go straight veganism. And the thing that you look at these diets, when you remove processed food, you feel better. And it's like these people are yelling at each other. No, I feel great doing this. No, I feel great doing that. And they're both right. Right? They're both right. And what they have both done is they've removed processed food. Most cases, they've removed seed oils. And it's like, yes, like these are the commonalities that I've found. And when I talk to people, it's like remove processed food, limit your sugars to natural sugars, try to eat whole foods, eat good sourced meat if you go that way, and it's like, it I love what you're saying because it's spot on, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I wanted to make sure that we hit on this point that's like everybody's body is different, and it's going to react different to different foods because there's a whole science behind it. People's blood, there's different blood types that process different foods, and when I eat a bowl of, Brussels sprouts, you eat a bowl of Brussels sprouts, our body is not going to get the same nutrition out of those.
Yeah.
I might feel horrible from it. You might feel great from it. So it's like eat whole foods. And when you feel good when you eat something, keep eating that. And when you feel bad eating something, stop eating that.
Yeah.
And so it's like I love that. What's your diet? The Jenny Lang diet. And it's like, and what I've incorporated, obviously, you've heard my story about fasting and intermittent fasting, and I do longer fasts. I've done, multiple times. I've done 7-day water only fasts, and like because that's where I've gotten because I do that because it makes me feel better. It's like a reset. But I don't mean to interrupt, and,
No.
and and I want you to continue Tim's story, but I want to just co-sign on, when you're making changes, you have to you have to clear the slate and you have to be like, okay, my thinking has to change because what I've done to this point hasn't worked.
Yeah.
Right? So I need a different way of thinking. I need a different way of taking action because the action that I've taken and the way I've been thinking has got me to this point where I need a change. And so, you know, go on with to your point, and I'll let you continue on. Whatever your preconceived notions of nutrition and diet and exercise is, you have to have an open mind and a clear slate, and it's trial and error.
Yep. Absolutely. Couple points to that too. And for one, you said trial and error. That's what you ended on. The one thing I always try to get people to, and this is the environment we're in with social media and such, and the things people have experience with going on a diet, right? It's drudgery, it's deprivation, it's frustration, and it messes with you mentally. Like, I've done this before, it didn't work. It didn't work. Well, there's other ways to do it. And you may not have had that, like I go back about the whole well-being. You may not have had that social support or community to help you through it, right? Or the coach or whomever, dietitian, whomever, to help you through it. So I want to just call that out, that when people come into my world, and I say my world because Libra is my world, this is me. I want them to find the joy in making the changes. Find the fun in it. I think we've lost the fun in it. You know what I mean? Trying new foods, new recipes, shopping in a different way. There's fun in it. Like even recipe swapping with people. I have a Facebook group called Recalibrate Yourself. And they love sharing recipes and foods and pictures and all that. Like, got to have some enjoyment with that, right? So bringing that back in so that it doesn't feel like drudgery, because that's what people default. They hear diet and they freak out. They literally freak out. The other thing is that people, it is a hard thing mentally for them to think of going and making a change. And like you had all of these things that you were going to focus, like good things. Don't go to any place as a drive-through window and so on. And for me, it's, I want people to change their mindset in the sense that it doesn't need to, you don't need to go from 0 to 100. Just start with the first step. Like MLK has a quote that says, you don't need to see the whole staircase. You just need to see the first step. Just take the first step. And so I'm always telling people, I adjust my speed to you and what makes you feel right. The other thing is that I want you to pay attention to yourself for once. Sometimes we were doing things with in a rush or in the madness of life. We're shoving food down our face, especially stuffing feelings, right? And or in a, you know what I mean, you're just not present. Like, pay attention to how you feel when you eat foods. Like, I do have that, and I have that with the program I use, that they can food journal if they want to. It's open to all my clients. But I just want to bring the joy and realize that people can just do it in small steps. Stop worrying about making these grandiose changes, right? Because that's so overwhelming, and half the time, well, actually more than half the time, it doesn't fit in your life anyways. So back to Tim, he had quite the unique story. And like I said, I'm most often coach women, but I obviously can coach men too. And he had, if I remember right, he probably had diabetes for almost 2 decades. I mean, he's had it for a long time. And food access was different for him, like super healthy foods. But one thing that came out of it, besides the fact, and I'll actually go through this first, the fact that we worked together for 6 months. 6 months is 12 sessions. The one thing that he noticed immediately, actually 2 things, his energy level went up. Then he started losing weight without effort. He was like, why is this falling off? And by the way, men, you have it easier than women because it falls off faster than women. Thank you, testosterone, right? Thanks to testosterone. So it fell off so quickly. He's like, what is going on? And he got to the point, it was almost comical. Like, towards the end, he's like, I had to buy a whole new wardrobe because of you.
Yeah.
Nothing stayed on. His wife's making fun of him. But he started just incorporating things. And that's what we're taught in my coaching school, is crowd out the bad stuff. If you can't let go of the old, at least add in the good stuff. And then what ends up happening, you crowd out the bad. You're like, I feel so good on this. Why would I want to eat that anymore? So he just started making these small steps and paying attention. And I want to make this clear with everyone. I am not a doctor, and I always, always, always encourage people to have their doctor along the journey with them. He probably in that 6 months saw his doctor 3 to 4 times, easily, maybe even more. So I want the doctor to be with you on the journey. And so he started losing the weight, and then he was having these situations where he was like, I don't think my medication's not working right. And so what was happening is his body was getting the nutrients, and his blood sugars were naturally going into a natural state, that he was realizing, because he would feel very fatigued. You get the cold sweats after taking medication. He's like, oh my gosh. So he's calling his doctor, and then the doctor kept taking the medication down, down, down. He is just like you, no longer type 2 diabetic. He has cut out so many medications because he had a whole bunch of them. There's actually a picture he posted in my Facebook group of the bag of pills. He took one of those, what do they call those, Ziploc gallon bags, so it's clear. And he dumped all the pills that he no longer takes that he had left. And it was just a mountain of pills. Unreal. And everyone was like, oh my gosh. Keep in mind, he was later in life, right? 60 years old. So he ended up going, I think he was around that 300 mark, if I'm right. And I'm sure Tim's going to watch this. And he was down. I remember once, it was the coolest thing because I love like triple numbers. He was at 222 at one point. So in 6 months of us working together, and it's not me. I don't take credit for this. I give him all the credit because he did the work. He put his mindset in. He was willing to listen. He was open to conversation. He was willing to try. When something didn't work, he was willing to try something else. And he was constantly communicating with me like, okay, this kind of worked. I didn't really like it. Can we do something else? Or, you know what I mean? And for me, it's more of just supporting and inspiring and giving some ideas and letting them brainstorm, just being that person. And so yeah, he made a significant change. Okay, so now fast forward Tim now. This is what's so cool. He now has a regimen, and this is what he started when he was with me. He's a long haul truck driver. And you can fit in movement. And this is why I say movement instead of exercise. You just got to move. He would walk around his entire, and this is something we brainstormed in a session, walk around the entire truck. I think the first time he did it like 3-4 times because, he was very heavy. And so he kept doing that. And now he got to the point, he's like, I can walk half a mile around my truck because he calculated how big it was. And so he'd go to the rest stop, get gas, and he would use that because he goes, then I would have more energy to be able to concentrate when I'm on the road. And then I'm burning off calories and I'm moving, right? I feel my best when I do that. But I was just using my truck as my treadmill, basically. And so he kept doing that. He still does that. He got to the point where, so he long haul truck driver, but he carries the heavy stuff like logs and machinery, that, super heavy stuff. And he couldn't do that. He couldn't move that stuff very easily when he was doing it initially. And by the end, there was these younger guys going, how in the world are you doing that? Like, they were like, how old are you? He started getting those questions like, how are you moving that on your truck? And he's jumping up. He goes, I haven't jumped on my truck in so long. So it was just those cool little stories, but he just kept trying one little thing at a time and it just kept adding up. He now is still kept all the weight off. He says he goes, I didn't diet. I went and changed my entire lifestyle. It's a lifestyle change. There's so many people that know him because of the community he lives in. It's like a small town. They're like, what did you do? What are you doing? And he has no more craving for the processed stuff anymore. He'll go to family functions. He's like, I'm not even interested in the cake and the cookies and all that. He goes, I'm not, because I know what it's going to do to me. So now he's actually just turned 62 and he works at the gym. He goes out to the gym 3 days a week when he's home and he's not driving. And he, those big tractor tires where you flip them?
Yeah.
He did 62 of those for his 62nd birthday.
That's awesome.
The guys at the trainers were like, what in the world? And so now he's actually under training to be, what do they call that? The strongest man competitions for his age group. Yeah, he is just killing it.
That's awesome.
Just killing it.
Yeah, I mean, what happens is that you create new habits and you create new neural paths in your head and your brain, and you create, and they say it takes 30 days of doing something every day in a row to create those new neural paths, good or bad, right? So when I was eating fast food every day, as soon as I hit that 30-day of eating fast food every day, that became a habit. And as soon as I stopped doing that 30 days in a row, that became the habit. So that means on day 31, it was going to be harder for me to go actually eat fast food than it would to not eat fast food.
Yeah.
That and so that's what we're creating. We're creating new habits, but also within the structure, what I've learned is that your taste buds change. Your body changes. You change, right? And so it's like you go off sugar for a month and then you go eat an apple. Man, that is the sweetest apple. I mean, it tastes like a piece of candy.
Yep.
Right. And it's like that's our body, and especially our tongue grows faster than any other part of our body. And you change your taste buds in a matter of weeks, and it's like things that, and so for me, what I had to learn is that it's almost as psychological as anything. Right.
Yeah.
It like I had like, because I still look, I am human. I love pizza and I love ice cream. Look, somebody who, and this is my experience, I went over 350 pounds 3 different times, meaning I went over 350, then I lost weight and got under 300 pounds, got down to like 280, 290, went back over 350, lost the weight, got back under 300. And then the third time I did it, I got up to 374, right? And then got to where I am today. But my point being is that somebody who does that, somebody who gets to that weight loves to eat. And I love to eat, but now it's like, I have to understand my tendencies and, if I do eat that pizza or that ice cream, right, not to do it 2 days in a row, not to let that old habit creep back in, and have grace for myself being like, yeah, I just ate half of a large pizza. That's okay. Right. I'm going to
Yes.
make sure that doesn't happen for another 6 weeks,
Yep.
and then, when that opportunity arises and, it's changing your habits and changing your thinking, knowing that I'm human and I'm not going to be perfect. And when I'm not perfect, don't let that snowball.
Yep.
Understand, okay, I just ate some ice cream, I love frozen custard. I just ate a large frozen custard with hot fudge on it. Okay, I'm not doing that tomorrow, and I'm not doing that this week, and I'm not doing that next week, and I'm gonna, maybe I'll do that next month,
Hmm.
right? And so it's like, and within that structure, it's like I can still enjoy things that I enjoy doing because I'm never gonna not love pizza. I'm never gonna not love
I do
frozen
too.
custard, right? So it's like, but the thing is that I used to enjoy it every week. I used to enjoy it a couple times a week, and it's like, and the hard thing is now though, when I do enjoy it, like I know tomorrow I'm not gonna feel very good,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I literally have like food hangovers.
Yep.
And so it's like that helps me not do it for a bit of a time, but that also is like I I don't like feeling like that, so I don't do it as and the problem was I didn't know what feeling bad was
Right.
because I lived at feeling bad.
Yep.
That was my baseline was feeling like garbage. And I didn't know I felt like garbage. That was just how I lived, and that's
Yep.
how I felt. And now I know it's like I love feeling good and I want to do things that makes me feel good. I didn't know this was an option.
Yep.
When I was 374 pounds, I've had 4 knee surgeries. Like I thought I was forever condemned to when I walk downstairs, there better be a handrail or I'm screwed.
Yeah.
And I mean that, like,
Yeah.
like, I was like, I get to a set of stairs, like, there's no handrail. I don't know if I'm gonna make it down these stairs. Like, that's how I lived, and it's like every step was pain, and it's like, this is just what my life's gonna be. And until I got to that point where it's like, I'm not going to live any longer if I don't do something about this. And that's when shifts started happening.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you said that about, the different feeling of your body and like how you react to sugar or how you now react to pizza. That baseline thing for me was I had the exact same thing. I didn't even know I was really my digestive system was so messed up and I had gluten issues and all that, right? My whole insides was inflamed. The one thing with Tim's story that was really interesting to your niece situation, which is similar, he got in a terrible car accident many years ago. He hit a deer on his motorcycle. He
Ooh.
could have died and he didn't, but he was broken. I mean, just terrible recovery. One of the things though, he injured his neck so bad that he ended up getting Botox injections into his neck to help with the inflammation. What was interesting while we were in the 6 months, he had to go in for his, I think it's every 6 months, maybe a year. I can't remember. I think it was 6 months to go in for his Botox injection. And they have to be super duper careful where they put that. And if anyone's familiar with Botox, I mean, it's kind of crazy. They literally injecting in the back of his head. So he goes, I don't have any. Normally, when I have to go get that done, I can tell I need to have it done. I don't think I need it done. I
Mm.
feel so good. I don't even feel the inflammation anymore. So he was like talking to that doctor or practitioner, like, I don't think I need it. Can I wait a few months? And they're like, yeah, just wait and see how you feel in 3 months. And it kept going, kept going. They're like, you don't need it. He changed the inflammation load in his body by changing how he ate and his movement, that he didn't even have to have a major thing. So that was like one of the big things that he had on his, and they weren't cheap to have those done.
Right.
So thinking of them, hey, that's the one thing he goes, I thought it was going to be expensive to buy all these foods and change my diet, but then I just switched it. I don't have to buy the $500 worth of diabetic medication. He goes, I can put that back into food and save money. Well, now, and
Well,
he
and
drove,
that's his medicine now. The food
right,
is the medicine. Like,
right,
that's what ends up happening, right? It's
right.
like you can and people are like, "Oh, it's so expensive to eat healthy." And yeah, it is expensive, but you know what's more expensive? Buying insulin every
Right,
month and
right.
buying metformin and buying the cholesterol medicine. That's expensive,
And the
especially if you don't
medical
have
bills.
right, and medical bills. So it's like, do you wanna pay on the front end or do you wanna pay on the back end?
Right.
Do you wanna feel good
Absolutely.
and pay on the front end? That's what I've learned. It's
Yep.
like my medicine today is food. I don't take anything outside of, some supplements, like, I take some some D4, whatever, vitamin D4 or D2 and K4.
Oh yeah.
And I take some omega fatty acids and some really clean supplements, some stuff that's natural, that's good and clean sourced. And it's like, but I don't put in, I don't even take Advil. If my knees are bothering me, I just double up on the bone broth, or, it's like I don't take any medicine anymore.
Yeah.
The last drug I take is I still drink coffee. That's the last thing I'm like holding on to my coffee. But outside of that, it's like I don't take anything else. That's because I don't need anything outside of what my body creates.
Yeah.
And that's just that. And it's been a long, strange trip to get here, and this is what works for me. And I
Yeah.
liked what you said, is that Tim had to do it for Tim,
Yeah.
right? And all you provide is a template, and say, hey, here are some ideas that work for people. Take from this template, take from it, and kind of rivet it down around you and see what fits and what doesn't, and keep what does and get rid of what doesn't. And that's
Yeah.
kind of my message, is that unfortunately God didn't give me the power to help other people. Like, that power is not within Jake Guterres, right? But what God did give me are these life experiences, right, that I can share, and people can help themselves, because
Yeah.
ultimately that's what has to happen. It
Yep.
has to be a willingness and a open-mindedness to change the things they're doing, and you have to do it for yourself.
Absolutely. There was one thing that was another cool story about Tim with his weight loss, especially. So he had a very supportive wife, which not all of my clients have. But I want this to be said, because I think the spouses should hear this, or the partners, or whomever, right? She lost weight as a residual effect of him losing it, because she was helping. She didn't want her husband to die. She didn't want him to be sick. And she was on the journey supporting him. And she wasn't even in the coaching. Sometimes I could tell she was obviously there in the room listening to the coaching sessions, right? That was his choice. But she was helping him through, like, to find the food, to cook it, the recipes, and all that. She lost so much weight. She had to get rid. She was wearing clothes she had in the closet forever. She's like, I haven't worn this in 10 years. You know what I mean? So the residual impact you have for yourself, you don't see it in the moment, but you are impacting people, your future self, and the people in your future and in your present moment. You're impacting them. And that, for me, is very, if there's anything I can do with helping moms or parents or whomever, is to children watch their parents. And if I can impact the future of the children because the parents made changes and the children watch them and learn from their parents, and they have a healthier future, I did my job. Like, that's the biggest blessing on the planet. And the other thing I wanted to call out real quick, because you brought it up, that you talk about yourself, you gave yourself grace. The two things I tell people, and you can see it on my website around the rules that I have for my group coaching programs. There's a couple things I want to call out. One, I try to rewrite the script in people's heads. We give ourselves so much crap when we don't do things that we think we're supposed to do, right? I didn't do this right. Oh, and we got to stop doing that. We should be treating ourselves with the best, absolute, in the most absolute positive way. So you give yourself grace. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be just, peaches and cream the whole way through the process, right? But give yourself grace and be kind to yourself. The other thing that I try to tell people is, you have to be kind to yourself, but you have to be able to, what's the right word for this? Like, give yourself respect, and be open to the changes. So I always tell people, when they come into a group coaching program, you have to be respectful to other people's journeys. I'm going to be respectful to your journey. I'm not going to know exactly what your life is like, but you have to do that for yourself and for others. So it's really being respectful and giving yourself grace, and stop beating yourself up for it. I mean, that is just such a common reaction to people. And just because it didn't work the one time doesn't mean it's not going to work, you know what I mean, again. that is just that's a common conversation I have to have with people around that, is just treating yourself better and changing that narrative in your head. It's just I say it's got to try to change it into thinking like it's a game. You're just trying something new, you're enjoying it, and if it doesn't work, okay, move on. Just let it go, move on.
Yeah, I mean, that's a practice. I even work on some, I mean, it's for me, it's like, cause I'll do something, it's inner dialogue, but it's also, it manifests itself outwardly in terms of like, I'll knock over a coffee across the table and be like, oh, I'm such an idiot. Not that I really think that I'm an idiot, right? But my subconscious is going to believe whatever I tell it.
Yeah.
So if I'm just saying, because look, I know I'm not an idiot, but if my words come out and say, oh, I'm so stupid for knocking over a cup of coffee, like that's going to be my narrative. And that, and I will start believing that I'm stupid. Kind of, I want to go full circle, kind of back like what you were told when you were a kid. You're dumb. I was always in the lowest reading group. I was
Yeah.
always in the special, I had to go to the special learning center, right?
Same.
And it's like my whole life, it's like that was just, I was not a good student. Look, I come to find out that, I was diagnosed with ADD 3 different times. And fortunately, my mom didn't allow them to put me on Ritalin when I was a kid. And she said, no, he's going to figure this out, and now today dealing with my ADD is a superpower. And I'm so thankful I didn't go on that. Now I handle, this, what quote unquote, this diagnosis of attention deficit disorder, right? Where it's like, man, when I'm good and I'm doing my practices in the morning and I'm exercising, it's like I can manage it all and I'm great. And I'm levels ahead of all the kids that were ahead of me in the reading group, and I
Yeah.
probably read more than anybody else that I know, you know, and it's like, but it's like, I was always told these things. And it's like, if we don't change the narrative, and it has to start with what we tell ourselves. And it, like I said, I have now, when I spill a cup of coffee, I'll be like, whoops, what an accident. Time to clean it up.
And now you can understand why I brought Clarity Catalyst into the program or into my world, because that's exactly what it's designed to do, is to help you change the narrative, have the tools so that when you do decide to make the other changes, it is far easier, and you catch yourself with that voice of judgment in your head and shut that gremlin off and kick it to the curb and change the narrative. Go from voice of judgment to the voice of wisdom. And those are terms used in Clarity Catalyst. And in helping people figure out how to do that, so that when you drop the coffee or you get in the car accident or whatever it might be, or boss is yelling at you, you can handle it so far differently than you would have in the past. And it won't completely derail you. Because, it's so, I always tell people, if you can go through that program and you decide to keep going with health coaching, think of that train track. You're on the track, you're doing good. And then what Clarity Catalyst is, what I want it to be, is you go through that program. And so when you do go into health coaching, if you go off track, say someone dies in your family, or you get laid off from your job and you're trying to make all these health changes, you might go a little off track because you're just handling life, right? But before, you would have gone so far off the track, it's so much harder to get back on it, right? I just want it to be used so that that it's so much easier to stay on track. And even if you go off a little bit, you can come back a heck of a lot easier than before. And so when you're talking,
derailed.
Yes, right. Right. And then that voice of judgment in your head is completely taking over because you went off the rail so far, you're never going to get back. That narrative comes back, and it's like it keeps you off the track completely. And that's the last thing you want to have happen. Yeah, it's crazy how much that controls your success.
Yeah. And I literally just heard this yesterday when I was running, and high five yourself, right? Mel Robbins talks about it. When you wake up, give yourself a high five in the mirror, because what you're doing is that you're telling your brain that you're worthy of that high five. Right.
Yeah.
And when you I've even heard look yourself in the mirror, and this is super uncomfortable, but I started doing this, like, look yourself in the mirror in your eyes, and 10 times say, I love you.
Yeah.
I love you. I love you. I love you. 10 times tell yourself that in the mirror, because what you're doing is you're telling that voice, right, that you're worthy. And then that voice starts changing, right? What you're doing is you're changing the narrative,
Yeah.
right? Because when you start to attack that person, like, no, no, wait, I love that person. Or wait, no, 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 I just high five that person. No, 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 no. You're not gonna like. So you are restructuring. I mean, all our brains are big chemical factories,
Yeah.
right? And we change the chemistry of our brain. Look, we've talked about it in the past, you and I, about my work with Wim Hof, my cold exposure, you know, doing those crazy 42-mile runs, all that is like, I'm just finding these tools to help myself. I hate the word biohack. I don't even like that, because what I'm doing is I'm just remembering how I should be.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just remembering the way that God created me to be.
Yep.
Right. And that's all it is I'm getting rid of those narratives that aren't true, that I've told myself for 20, 30 plus years, and it's like all these things are just tools to create the best version of me, because ultimately that's what I want. And
Yep.
knowing that I'm human, and I'm not going to you know do my best all the time, right? But just showing up is doing my best today.
Yep.
Just showing up.
I think it's interesting you said that about Mel Robbins and saying I love you. And I want to give people like little nuggets of info here. And I think you would agree. One of the best teachers on doing that and changing your mindset and the gremlin in your head was Louise Hay. She was one
Mhm.
of the best.
Absolutely.
Honestly, if anyone could go find Heal Your Life, it's an old documentary and she has a book associated to it, which you can get her books on Audible and listen to them because that's how I have to do things. But watch it. It's life changing. She was one of my top teachers as I was trying to dig myself out of that hole I got myself into mentally and emotionally. So I just want to call it out because that was when you and I met. That was one of the people we talked about: Wayne Dyer, Louise Hay, and
Yep.
Dolores Cannon, and all these people.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. And Louise Hay, if you're familiar, Hay House Publishing, and she's the one who published all Wayne Dyer's books. So
Yep.
both, you and I have that our teachers, right? They're our
Yes.
teachers, and they'll always be our teachers. And
Yep.
it's and I want to land the plane because we've gone almost an hour and 45 minutes here. Um, but it's an open-mindedness to always be the student,
Yep.
right? I'm never done learning, right? And that's when all I tell myself this every day is that what is most important is that I don't know anything, right? And what I do know is way less important than what I don't know. What I don't know is way more important than what I do know. And it's like I used to call myself a seeker. I still like to seek, but it's like I just want to learn. I want to learn more, and what I have learned is not as important as what I want to learn.
Yeah.
And so with that all said, I just want to give you a little forum to, if people are interested in your services, and they're wondering if this is right for me, how do they get in contact with you? I definitely want to give you a platform to let people know, because I am a subscriber to your newsletter. I get your newsletter regularly. There's a lot of great nutritional information in there, recipes. It's thought provoking, so I want to give you the platform to give people the information to subscribe to your newsletter. Best way to contact you, and then throw out your social media handles so people can follow along on those social medias.
So the best way to reach out, website is the best. I try to put almost everything on there without overwhelming anyone. So take a look at that. You'll see the coaching heading, and that goes into Clarity Catalyst, group coaching, private coaching. I do have a give back program you'll also see on there. I am right now, I open the group coaching programs. Those are open at certain times of the year. So they're actually two open right now. So the women's group health coaching program is open. It is slotted to start next week on the 18th. And then the second one is the Clarity Catalyst program, which is 8 weeks. And that one starts on the 31st of July. I do limit the group health coaching to the max will be 20 enrollments. So there is space limited. This women's group health coaching program, since it's the first one, I'm doing a founding members discount of 50% off. So it's pretty steep. You're getting a lot for 12 sessions for 6 months. So that's $800. It would typically be $1,600. And then the Clarity Catalyst right now for the summer program is $697, just to be transparent. And then, but you can find a lot of information on there. If you want to find me on that website, at the bottom, you should find a way to contact me. If you go to support@librahealthcoach.com, you can just email me. Just email me at support@librahealthcoach. That's just an email box that I can utilize. And then the Instagram handle is the same, @LibraHealthCoach. I'm also on Facebook. Libra Health Coach is on there for a Facebook page, but I also have a Facebook group called Recalibrate Yourself. The word Libra is in capital letters inside Recalibrate. And so that's a Facebook group you can join. There's obviously an entry to make sure that you answer the questions and so on. You can also, on my website, you can access my mailing list and get a free online program, educational program around healthy habits. So if you do join, that's the first thing you'll get. I want to be really clear, and this might come from my corporate background. I don't like spamming people a lot. So I don't push an email constantly to people. So I'm really mindful of that. And I want easy to read, quick to read as much as possible in my emails. So just a heads up to give people. So those are the kind of the key areas as far as finding me. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. The one thing I would say, as far as a quote that you can't see it because my office has switched around, but I have a quote that I literally put on my wall, and it says, and it's from Wayne Dyer. So I know, Jake, you're going to smile. If you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And I've literally put it on my wall forever because it reminds me of that. And I always want to make sure people hear that quote too, because it's so telling.
That's the best. It is the best. And it's, I close out all my podcasts with a Wayne Dyer quote as well. But Jenny Lang, LibraHealthCoach.com. I'll have all your information in the notes below. So if you didn't catch any of what she said, check out the notes. Her website will be down there. Her social media handles will be down there. And I just want to say, from a friend to friend, so much gratitude for you coming on, taking your time out, and sharing your knowledge and wisdom with the listeners of my podcast. Who would have thought, two strangers sitting next to each other at a Health Freedom for Humanity symposium would be doing a podcast several years later. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. And I love you, dude. You're awesome.
Right back at you. And how I close it out is I say, when you change your thinking, you change your life. Good night now.